Bunge la Kitaifa ambapo nina mwenzangu Vincent Odor, karibu sana kwenye matangazo haya bajeti. Nadhani kwamba umekuwa katika Bunge la Kitaifa, umetangamana na wabunge wawili watatu. Je, wanasemaje kuhusiana na bajeti hii ya mwaka huu?
Naam, karibu sana hapa, tukizidi kusubiri waziri wa fedha aweze kuwasili hapa katika bunge kuweza kusoma bajeti ya mwaka 2024 mwaka 2025. Kwa sasa wabunge wanaendelea kufika hapa, na kwamba waziri atakapowasili ataweza kupokelewa na yule mwenyekiti wa kamati ya fedha pamoja na yule mwingine wa kamati ya bajeti, ili aweze kusoma na Wakenya waweze kujua serikali imetenga pesa kwa sekta zipi na ni kiwango kipi. Kwa sasa niko na wabunge wawili hapa, niko na mbunge wa Nyando Jared Okello pamoja na mbunge wa Kigumo Kamau Munyoro ambao wako hapa tuweze kupata maoni yao. Tukianza tu nawe Bwana Okello, sijui maoni yako, what do you make of this budget so far, where we are coming just after the end of public participation with the Finance Bill 2024? What do you make of all this process as per where we are right now?
Kwanza kabisa ni kuwashukuru mwafaka ambao umetupatia. Kiswahili changu ni nadra, sasa utaniwia radhi nizungumze tu kwa lugha ya Kimombo. This is one of the biggest, not even one, the biggest budget this country has ever faced, from 3.6.02 trillion. This is very, very big. The bulk of it going to the departments of education, health and security, which is a cog within our country. And therefore, we are seeing a very, very big budget. But again, the budget must also be linked with the revenue. So we expect the government to come up with measures that will generate revenue, the budget line items. Of course, we know that our collection as a country has been to the tune of about 2.5 trillion shillings, leaving a huge deficit of about 1.5 trillion, which has to be funded from other quarters. We do know that the taxation regime has kept on shifting because the budget must be funded. Our donor partners have also come quite in handy in other projects to help us cushion the country against the absurdity of our collections. And therefore, the Finance Committee, in tandem with the Ministry of Treasury and Economic Planning, are coming up with measures on how to fund the entire budget. The report is yet to be tabled, and that will be done next week on Tuesday. Thereafter, there will be a very comprehensive discussion of the report from the Finance Committee. However, the Minister of Treasury and Economic Planning is expected this afternoon to lay bare areas where they would want to reduce taxes or tax a little higher to augment the budget that we have.
Before I come back to you, Bwana Munyoro, I don't know, what do you make of the budget, having looked at it right now, and also the process of the financial bill, Finance Bill 2024? What do you make of it so far? As a member of Parliament, you're supposed to represent the people.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that we are seeing is the budget is very good, looking at what it's funding. I know we have money for coffee, we have money for health, for the medical interns. You remember there was a strike by medical interns. I've seen also they've catered for subsidized fertilizer. And we know also in terms of infrastructure, especially us who are suffering with the Mau Mau roads, we expect to see a substantial amount of money placed there so that we are able to build the same. I know we also have money for employment of teachers. One of the key components of our government is funding education, and I know there will be employment of teachers, so we expect to see a lot of that. Regarding the finance bill, I think one of the things that people have been unable previously to connect is the budget and the finance side, because you budget, but then you must have money to cater for the budget. So what Jared is saying is about, the budget is about 4 trillion. It's never been that high. And to fund that budget, the finance bill as it is, the one that was proposed by the Treasury, we've done public participation, was meant to raise about 300 billion. An extra 300 billion. And you see the increment of the budget is about 400. So it means that they are trying to see whether you can be able to raise the deficit through the finance bill. Now, we've done public participation. People have come in with views. In fact, we've never had as many petitions as the ones we've had this time around. We got over 1,000 petitions. And people came and made their presentations. I know you've been covering the same. And we have to incorporate that. We are writing the report this week, and we'll finish on Monday so that the report can be tabled on Tuesday. What most people also don't understand is that someone like Jared cannot discuss the finance bill before the report is tabled, because that is then will form the basis of whether there will be any amendments proposed by members of parliament. Then they'll be able to know whether they'll pass the bill as it stands or they reject. And I think as a committee, once we finish that process, then it comes to Parliament so that members of Parliament can do their work of legislation. They will decide to pass the bill or reject the bill depending on what we incorporate from the public participation. Something I also want to mention is that there was some rumors and people saying that we call for public participation in vain. And if you recall last year, the proposal for housing bill, the housing levy was supposed to be 3%, and it was changed by the Finance Committee to 1.5%. And I think it would have been a huge outcry. I mean, it would have been bigger if we had let it remain as is. And we got that from the presentation. Right now, there are so many taxes that people are talking about and they are unhappy with. So we have to incorporate the views of the public, because ultimately, they are the ones who pay tax, and they are the ones who are being served. So we must incorporate their views.
Bwana Okello, do you agree with Monyoro with regards to this issue of public participation, especially in this budget-making process? And also, what do you make of the revenue-raising measures the Kenya Kwanza administration has come up with regards to this budget?
We are under new constitutional dispensation. Previously, the budget-making process was under the domain of Treasury and the Executive. And with the new constitution, we call it new because it hasn't been there for much longer than the old one. It was so proposed that the budget-making process was to be under the purview of National Assembly or Parliament, so to speak. And therefore, that role was taken away from Treasury. But now what Treasury remains with is to present the budget policy statements that will then guide the members of Parliament in allocating resources. This actually, since Ruto came into office in the year 2022, we as Kenyans have never debated any budget as it has been during Ruto's time. And the reason is simple, that there are many, many punitive measures on the new taxation regimes that Ruto is coming up with. If everything remained constant, as it were, and you remember, just before President Uhuru left office, we had the COVID, which really ravaged our nation. And as a result, President Uhuru, in his wisdom, and together with his team, chose to cut back on so many taxes, exempted so many commodities under taxes. And that, therefore, in a way, Kenyans against the many, many economic challenges that permeated then. Ruto came into office, scrapped all of them, even though the COVID effects were still in place. And Kenyans then woke up to the reality that we are in a regime that is never responsive to their plight. And that is why many Kenyans have so chosen to debate quite in-depth the finance bill together with the budget in its entirety. You remember that last year, for example, there were over 700 petitions against the finance bill. This time round, over 1,000 petitions have so far been received, and you don't know how many have been locked out by dint of time. So it could be much more. But all these are triggered by the taxes that raid the pockets of Kenyans, leaving them with absolutely nothing to save. In fact, as a reality, Kenyans are working. They're not working for their families. Because you look at the taxes, for example, pay as you earn at 32.5%, housing levy 1.5%. Now you go to purchase each and everything in our shops, petrol stations, it is about taxes, taxes, taxes. So what therefore remains to take care of a family is so paltry that many then choose not to work or to, refuse to pay taxes, which is illegal, but what options do they have? And especially the private sector that cannot effectively be catalogued on the kind of taxation that they should pay. So they choose to ignore those taxes. So it is a tragedy that we are facing as a country. And the biggest question that you may want to ask yourself, Ruto is now superintending the third budget for his regime. Of course, the 2022 was shared partly with Uhuru and himself. Then you have the last year's budget in its entirety, and now this is the third one. If we look around, you may want to ask yourself, whereas Kenyans are being taxed to death, what are some of the flagship projects that come up with this taxation regime? Zero. I mean, my brother here just alluded to the fact that they are suffering from the Mau Mau roads that were started by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta due to non-funding. Yet, President Ruto has mopped up more funds than any other regime ever. Today, they are proposing to add 300 to 400 billion more taxes, more collections on Kenyans, and that is going to be channeled to the commodities that we use, including transportation, because there's been a misinformation that these taxes are targeted at the rich. Far from it. Those rich people that they would want us to believe are the ones running transport systems, and those transport costs must be spread over to the end user. So you and I, if we jump into a matatu, we are basically going to pay much more than ever envisaged.
Let me listen also from Munyoro. Now you are a member of that finance committee. Doesn't what Okello is saying bother you as a member of parliament and also as a member of that committee with regards to what has been termed as the most punitive tax measures we've seen ever?
Thank you. I think there's something I want to say in terms of budget. That 4 trillion shillings budget, interest on loans alone are eating up 1 trillion shillings. That's just interest. The rest that remains, the collection that we do, out of 100 shillings, 61 is servicing debt. So we are left with less than 40 shillings for development. The money that remains, that is what is funding education, it's what is funding health, it's funding everything. So the issue of budget, we were in a catch-22 situation. We had very many debts and they had to be serviced somehow. And that is why I'm thinking the regime has come up with ways of taxes that may seem punitive. Ultimately, the whole idea is to deliver, because without us paying or getting money on the revenue side, we are unable to do anything that is in the budget. So if you want health, if you want to pay teachers, if you want to pay the security forces, if you want service on the roads or hospitals, there has to be money collected by the treasury.
So basically we are saying those punitive taxes that Kenyans are crying about, they are going nowhere.
No. You are misquoting me. What I'm saying, they may seem punitive. And we are discussing past. Because the finance bill as it is, we've not done a report, so it's not been tabled. So we do not know the taxes that will come into the house and what will be passed. Again, remember, once that comes into the house, the report is tabled. Members of parliament either pass the report or they reject the same. So that is left at there. The committee is to collect views. We do a report. This is what the people said. This is what we think we can be able to correct. And once that's done, then it's brought here. Remember, each member of parliament is entitled to make amendments. You can amend anything that comes into the house in form of a report. So that if you find that maybe a tax measure is punitive or there is something that you wanted included, then you can be able to do the same. So we wait for the report, we discuss the finance bill next week. Once it's tabled, we will come here and then you'll tell us this is the report you've tabled. What do you think of the report?
Let me ask you the last question, because I remember during the Finance Bill 2023, we remember President Ruto made it very clear that he'll be watching to see how his members of parliament will be voting. and we know what happened. Are you telling us this time round members of the legislators from the Kenya Kwanza side are going to vote based on their own independent decisions, or it will be a party position or the president's direction as representatives of the people?
I think we have three arms of government. We have executive, which is the presidency. He would want the bill to pass as is, because the proposals have come from the executive, and they come to the constitution separated the two, so that we can have checks and balances on excesses of the executive. So once you bring your proposals, we get them from Treasury. Then we go through public participation so that the views of the public can be incorporated in the report tabled in the House. Now, once it's tabled, we have a first, second, and a third reading. Once that's done, it becomes law. It becomes an act. And once that act is in place, then that will be there for the next 1 year. And you cannot make changes until 6 months elapse. So that's why the role of Parliament as members of Parliament is very critical in this process. So we bring the report as a committee. Once it's tabled, then members can discuss and do the same. The issue of being influenced, I don't think we've been influenced again. You were here when Linturi was being impeached. How did people vote? There is a party position, but there is a member of public, an MP position, because you are elected by the people. Your role is to serve the people. However, in all governments, we come here through parties. So we are in Kenya Kwanza, and we have party positions. They may have party positions even to reject other things that are good or bad, depending on their party position. But for this, I think we vote mostly on conscience and what you think will serve your people.
Thank you. So the last question as we tukimalizia, Bwana Okello, with regards to what he has said, do you still believe, looking at especially the ruling coalition or the members of Parliament, the side that formed government, can you say Parliament is still the last line of defense for Wananchi, especially with regards to things they are crying about?
Well, not anymore. It's usually very difficult for members of Parliament, especially those aligned towards the majority side, to reject any proposal that emanates from the executive. Zero. And we have seen this consistently in all the bills that come before us, the finance bill, together with many, many other things that we have seen. Once the executive has an interest in a matter and it comes on the floor of the House, it is as good as done. What is going to happen? Probably they will be summoned, not called, on Monday or Tuesday next week in State House, so that the Riots Act can be read to them. That anyone who will go contrary to this particular finance bill will face the wrath of the executive, and probably they are also threatened by, planting their opponents on the ground and funding them properly. So there are people who are, muzzled by the executive, and sadly they are the majority. Whereas the minority will always, and we shall, stand with the common people, aligning ourselves to their interests. We are so few that we have our say, but they will always have their way. But this is the only regime that I have noted with great concern that will never, never listen to Wanjiku down there on the ground. Yet when they were campaigning, the mantra of the bottom up, meaning those who are in the lower cadre, would be brought up the economic ladder where the few are. But it is now the direct opposite. They are only concerned about the haves and very least concerned about the have-nots.
I think that's the best place to end. Asante sana. Hapo tulikuwa tunazungumza na mbunge wa Nyando pamoja na mbunge wa Kigumo, na kwa sasa tunaendelea kusubiri na tuweze kusubiri waziri wa fedha kuwasili hapa, na tutaweza kuzungumza tena na wabunge wengi zaidi baada ya bajeti kusomwa, kuweza kujua misimamo yao kuhusiana na pia jinsi bajeti imeainishwa na pia jinsi zile kuhusiana na mswada wa fedha wa mwaka 2024, maoni yao kuhusiana na ule ushuru ambao uko kule ndani ambao Wakenya